So welcome to our panel on delivering projects more efficiently and cost effectively. My name is Corey Norton. I'm our Director of Business Development at Origo Software based in Austin, Texas. For all the New Yorkers in the room, I'm sure you're thinking, guy from Texas, how many times has he gotten lost in the subway this week? 0 so far. So I've got a good record. I'd like to kick things off by letting our panel introduce themselves, a little bit about their agency, and then some of the key projects that they're working on this year. So Ramona, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Good morning. My name is Ramona Harry. I am with Baltimore City. I work with the Mayor's Office on Infrastructure Development. I am a project manager, certified public manager for Baltimore City. And our infrastructure office provides oversight on all capital programs. Specifically, I manage the water, wastewater, and environmental projects for Baltimore City.
Hi, good morning. My name is Trish Lombardi. I'm Senior Vice President of Project Delivery for the New York Power Authority. So if you don't know the New York Power Authority, we're the largest state-owned utility in North America. So we have several generating stations, mostly large hydro in New York, and over 1,400 circuit miles of high voltage transmission within the state. So my group is really responsible for overseeing the large capital and some of the large O&M for not only our own assets at the utility, but also our customers, number in the room, Metro North, DEP, DCAS, et cetera, large governmental agencies across the state.
Good morning, I'm Yana Kozlovsky, Metro North Railroad. I spent a career first in the Army as a combat engineer. Working my way up, I spent a time with the Army Corps of Engineers in the Buffalo District, all the way up to overseeing all construction and combat operations in the Iraqi War. Came to work for Metro North Railroad 17 years ago, and I worked on the East Side Access Project, making that force count happen with Mr. Springer, Jamie Springer, and Ben Limmer were talking about force account. That's me. That's my job, is to provide that force account. So it was a great segue. If you want to stick around till right after lunch, I'll dive more into depth as to how to work with the railroads and with force account. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yannick. And we'll spend a little bit of time on how to most effectively work with railroads during the panel as well. So looking forward to hearing that. We have 3 very different agencies up here today, or different kinds of projects. So I'd love to kick off by getting an idea of what project delivery methods each of you are using in your agencies and why you chose to go about them in that manner.
So for Baltimore City, unfortunately, or fortunately for some, we have a charter that requires a low bid on actual construction. There is opportunity for design build, but it's an arduous process. You have to actually go through a review panel in order to be able to do a design build project. So we are design, we go through that process, then have to stop and go out for bid. That can be a 3 to 12-month process. And we're looking to reform some of that. So that's been a little bit difficult for us, but we're trying to work through and make it work as best as we can. And put in place all of those things to get them delivered on time and on budget. Right now with the inflation, we're putting things into place that can address projects that may have started and need to now go back and add for that increased budget.
Sure, so NYPA is a state entity, but we do have authority to do pretty much any delivery method we'd like. We do have public bidding requirements, so that is something we must do. But I think over the last couple of years, as we've seen capital increase, not quite to the extent of the numbers in the room talked about earlier on the panel, but just getting smarter, right? The way we procure, the way we partner with vendors, putting long-term agreements in place, using design bid builds where appropriate, as mentioned before, and using design build, EPC, CMAR, right, and all versions in between, and just getting smarter at doing that. I'd say that NYPA came from not a heavy capital intensive organization, more of a state of good repair, right? Just keeping our assets up and running in reliable fashion and safe fashion, right, for our piece of the utility grid. But over the last 5 years or so, NYPA is really in a growth mode, investing very heavily in transmission to meet the state's very aggressive clean energy goals. So NYPA now is in also the renewable space. So we've seen a very, not a heavy capital intensive organization turn into one in a very quick way. So again, I think just being really smart with our procurement methods and just being smart in the method we pick. Design build isn't appropriate for everything, might be appropriate for something, and making sure you have the right team, right, the right competencies internally to deliver a method like that effectively and efficiently, and right, using more of a traditional design bid build where appropriate.
We're the builders. We're a force account. We have a twofold mission. For projects, capital projects that we can build in-house, we will manage them ourselves. We will build them for you. We will ask you if it's a complicated project to actually design the project for us, then we will build it. If it's simpler, we'll design it in-house and we'll take care of it. You just simply fund it. If it's a more complex project, it involves third-party construction, such as what the Construction Development Corporation does, or what Connecticut Department of Transportation often will be doing on those mega projects. They will design those projects. A third party will come in to start building a project, and we supply all the force account. We coordinate all the track outages. We coordinate all the work in construction on or about the railroad, making sure that everything is done properly and making sure that you are safe in the construction and that the train operations are not impeded. So it's a two-part process that we are in, and that's it.
Fantastic. And Tricia, you mentioned something during your answer about having the right team in place. So I want to start with you on this next question, which is, how do you make sure that you have that right team in place, and how do you make sure that communication stays, how do you make sure the team communicates throughout this entire process?
So mention, maybe I'll try to keep it a brief answer. So 6 or 7 years ago, NYPA sort of recognized where the industry was going, right, and the need for growth and the need to increase competency. So we did embark what we call an asset management journey. So we were the first utility in North America to get ISO 55001 certified. And it was really a recognition to say that we need to understand our assets well, need to understand what a state of good repair mean to us. It doesn't mean everything to, same thing to everybody. And then how to prioritize our resources. And resources are people resources and financial resources. So knowing that wasn't going to happen overnight, understanding what that 5, 10, 20, 50-year plans were going to look like, where we needed to invest in people, and understanding we were going to become a very capital-intensive organization. It was, how do you become a little more efficient on O&M and grow your capital delivery organization, understanding it was probably going to peak, and the right understanding where we would be on the backside. So prepare us for a good asset management organization to finish construction and turn it over to operations and maintenance. So it was a recognition that we had to increase competencies right through the life cycle, right? Understanding the risks, from the asset management teams, right through the engineers designing, right through SSM, right, procuring, the builders, constructing, overseeing, and then right to our O&M teams. So people was a big part of it, and then it led from there. Process, technology, right, everywhere else that we just had to grow and grow in a very quick, efficient way.
We're in a unique position. We're both the customer and the builder. What is being built will be for our use, but we're also involved in the construction aspect of it all. The biggest issue that we have is making sure that you partner with us, first and foremost in scope development, to make sure that what it is that you're planning truly is what we need and that we can use it. Working with railroads is a little bit different than working with other modes of transportation. We'll get into more detail right after lunch on that and why. We ask that you take that into account. And then when it comes to the actual construction of it, when you're planning out the construction, actually going to construction, as I mentioned before in a previous discussion, the force account is a critical factor. And in fact, if you noticed from one of the slides that was shown at the very beginning, at the introductory talk, railroads are 116% come in over cost, over budget, and over time. Only second only to port construction. And why is that? It's because people underestimate the complexities of working with a railroad and with force account. And so if you're planning something very major, please sit down with us way ahead in advance. We're talking years in advance so that we can go ahead and prepare for that construction, especially it's going to be some major construction. One example, what Connecticut has started doing with us, and it's working like a charm, is we sit down, they plan out exactly what it is they want to be doing with us, what kind of support we will have to provide to make sure that that construction happens on time and on budget, so that we can go ahead and hire up the people that we need and then train those people in accordance with union rules and federal regulations so that they can go out there and actually participate in that construction, support that construction, and be available at the time that they are needed. The worst that can happen is that you launch a project and you turn to us for our support, and we turn around and say, we're sorry, but we lack the manpower with which to support you. And right off the bat, you're dead in the water. We can't approach the rail lines. So we ask that you work with us, partner with us in scope development initially to make sure that what it is that you're planning is something that we truly can use and how we can use it. And secondly, that we plan out the construction with us ahead of time so that we can hire up to have the support for you, the construction support that you need when you need it.
So for us, one of the things that we focus on is developing. We went back and looked at, okay, where are we failed? Where are our shortcomings? What are we good at? And a big part of what we had to do was look at process, technology, and workforce. For the water and wastewater industry, we're looking at 50% of operators and those people with the tactic knowledge able to retire at any given day. So if you're going to lose 50% of your workforce, you better have process in place that new folks can look to for direction. You got to document everything so that we can transfer that knowledge. And then we have to have the technology that's going to be able to capture that knowledge and deliver it to anyone in a manner that they can understand what it is you were trying to do. Because on any given day, you may not have the right staff on that project, and you may have to supplement. You may have to pull someone in, so you've got to have great data. So that's one of the things that we're working on, and making sure that we've documented, from that inception and thought all the way through to maintenance and management of your asset when it's completed, and document that process, what's built, how it's built, any struggles, and then going back, and what our office in the Mayor's Office of Infrastructure Development is doing is looking at that process as it moves forward, not only to keep the project on track, keep it on budget, but also to look at best practices and tweak them, because it's never, that's a living process. It has to happen continually. And I think sometimes we come up with a process and we say, this is it, and we're going to stand by it, and not realize that you absolutely have to modify that as you go forward, and sometimes tweak it specific to projects. So.
Fantastic. I think a few of you have mentioned integrating technology into these processes. So can you, and Ramona, we'll start with you. Can you start by telling us, how have you integrated technology into these processes, and how have you, begun to build that more and more into your day-to-day?
So for our day-to-day, whether you're on the construction side, you're on the design side, we are documenting CM14 is leaving. So we're now moving to Unifier. We are putting Unifier in across all capital projects so that we can capture all of the information. We're integrating. Last year, we went to Workday. So how do we get everybody paid? We've now got to integrate Workday with Unifier so that we can make sure we're paying appropriately, and we're making sure we're correcting some of our mistakes. Over the years, if you don't have your payment or your fiscal folks in line with the project delivery, you may have someone paying for line items that are not appropriate at that time. So this is now where we now have to bring all of the right people into the room as we're bringing in all this new technology. I think sometimes we forget, hey, we're gonna talk about Unifier, and it's gonna manage the project, and we're gonna bring project managers in, and we're gonna bring the construction folks in, and we forget, oh, bring fiscal in. How about you bring compliance in? Because they're the ones that are gonna manage, here's what the charter says you have to do. Bring the lawyers in. Make sure that you're gonna have all those check boxes that they're gonna need. Bring asset management in. And one of the things when you're thinking about putting technology in place, unifier, whatever you're gonna use, you've gotta have all of the right people at the table. Because even in the implementation of Workday, we had all of the HR folks in, we had fiscal folks in. Well, they didn't take into account, we have shift work. And that shift changes for each employee every 2 weeks. So I may be on an 8 to 4 for this pay period, and then I'm gonna switch to a 3 to 7. Well, that confused the technology because we didn't have all the right people in the room. So we're learning from all of those things to make sure that we put everybody in the room. Sometimes that can be chaos, but chaos is not always bad. Everybody gets to be heard and all the nuances get picked up and you get a better product at the end of the day and everyone gets to have what they need. For us, for oversight, we get to watch the process. We get to pull out, it's almost you're pulling out those bubbles and balloons and saying, okay, we've got to modify. We've got to go back and look at this particular issue. It happens and it's reoccurring, so let's assess and let's figure out what do we need to do technology-wise that we can either fix that? Or is there something outside of technology that we need to modify that process so that we can meet that need? And I think it's so important to make sure everybody's in the room. You know, we may, as you go through the process, some of those people will fall off, other people will fall into the process, but it's very important.
Absolutely, it's a lot about that internal collaboration, making sure that you have all the right resources in the room at any given time. Patricia, what about you?
So I'd say a couple things for us. So again, NIPA came from a place not so capital intensive. So I would say largely, I'd say we have 3 business units. There's more, but when you look at project delivery, IT, the utility side project delivery, and then our customer project delivery, all in different systems, who was in P6, who was in Microsoft Project, who had a homegrown SharePoint, who had something else, a little bit all over the map. So again, sort of as the asset management journey, right, growing as an organization, sort of the recognition that we got to put ourselves in the same place. From a couple of reasons, right? To understand, again, our financial resources, our people resources, like how is the enterprise doing managing projects and programs, right, across the life cycle. So we have invested in Procore, really largely for construction projects. What was UMT, now it's NH360 to help us manage portfolio management, project controls, right? Getting schedules for everything. Seems really simple, but we weren't there, right? Cost, baseline, resource loaded schedules, right? Everything that comes with a good cost, a project control organization. So recognition that we all had to find ourselves in the same platform. So we're still working through that, but we're getting there. We call Project Hub affectionately, and it's also about the process, right? So technology will only get you so far if you don't really have the right people and the process, right, to use the technology. And I think the other thing I would just add is NIPA's really doubled, probably tripled down on the use of drones and UAVs, right through inspections, right, understanding the conditions of our assets, which have helped let us see assets in a way that, you know, assets that are really hard to see, or you might need an equipment outage, right? Things that have been harder for us to understand the condition of. We've used drones, robots, underwater inspections, right? NIPA has a fair amount of civil infrastructure, and then carrying that data right through design, right? So when we can't send an engineer everywhere, right, being able to give them that data and then carrying it right through construction. This was the before condition. We use drones right through construction. One of projects right now under construction is a very large transmission job using drones to take aerial photos to calculate cut and fill, right? Earthwork, right? For documentation purposes. So kind of always learning the technology and understanding how to integrate it right through people planning in an office side, right through construction, and then how to turn over all that data to the O&M side once we're done, how to give them all that intel of this is everything we learned about the asset, here's how it was built, here's every piece of data we could share with you, right, that can only help better manage on the back end.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Patricia and Ramona said, especially when Ramona started. Get everybody into the room together. People, people, people. To piggyback a little bit what Patricia said, you have all these different softwares that are out there. Everyone's using their own. You've got to use one software. We don't care what software you're using. Just make sure everyone's using the same one. There's nothing more difficult than trying to transcribe data or information from one to another to a third. You will lose the information along the way. You lose data along the way. So when the project kicks off, choose a particular software, stick with it, train all the parties that are not familiar with that software on the use of that software. Allow for time for that training cycle to go through there. Otherwise, people will be lost. You don't want that. But then getting back to the people part, nothing can be more important than getting everybody together into the room to discuss the project face to face. That resolves a lot of miscommunication. When you realize some of that technology and messages going back and forth or design comments or whatever else, they're great, but there's nothing better than a face-to-face meeting where you can resolve the issues right up front. Because questions will pop up in the course of those discussions that otherwise would not come up when simply reviewing drawings or so forth like that. The other key thing I like to stress is going out to the project sites. Nothing can be more important than going out to the project sites. I cannot tell you how many design engineers I've spoken to and construction engineers that have not gone out to the project site and tried to manage the project from behind the desk. That cannot be done, because all the problems that are going to come up will come up out on the project site. That's when you go out there, you see what the issues are, and then you can address those. If you're simply looking at a piece of paper on your screen, okay, on your desk or something on your screen, you will not see all the surrounding circumstances around you. You will see only what it is that you're interested in seeing and what you're building that very moment. You will not see all of the outside factors that are impacting that construction or that design. And what will happen invariably, something will be impacting the point where what you're planning on doing is not buildable, either the way that you plan on building it or the way that you designed it. You have got to go out there and sit feet on the ground, not just yourself, but with that group that Megan was talking about. Go out there and look at it. Have everybody present. Talk it over. Discuss it. Then when you go back and you hunker down at that one piece of technology that you all agreed upon that you're going to use to interface all your planning and discussions with, then you can be very, very productive.
I would just add, it almost seems simple, but being in the one platform, like just that visibility, right? Been a PM probably for 15 years. Like we came from spreadsheets, like 17 spreadsheets, right? Is the job okay or it's not? Like I'm not really sure, right? Get back to you in a week. Just that visibility, right? As mentioned before, RFIs, submittals, right? Like that intel that the data is giving you, so that when, right, there's people there every day in the field, but those that have to go out maybe occasionally, like where to focus in, right? Understand like where really is the risk on the project? Is it going well or it's not? Right? Should be an easier question to answer. And I think transparency into one tool and the collaboration in one tool from the vendors, the owners, right? The orchestra that it kind of has to be put together to put a good project together. Just that visibility into one platform. Again, sounds obvious and simple, but probably understated, right? How important that is.
Absolutely. So, we've talked about people, we've talked about process and making sure that one, there is one, but two, it's standard across the team. How do you make sure that you have the right resources? And more importantly, how do you make sure that you have the right resources at the right time as you're delivering these projects? Yeah, Ramona, do you want to kick us off?
So as you're bidding for your design and you start to build your team, I think this is where it comes back to having that source of managing your data, your submittals, all of your information, because you can then map out, okay, this is what the plan is. We've had all the folks in the room, and you can stage and you can stagger what you need when you're going to need it, and make sure that it's that orchestra. When does this group roll in and when do they roll out? You can graph and map those ebbs and flows in, I need you at this point. This is where we're gonna need you the most. As you ramp off, somebody else is ramping on. We can make sure that we're transferring the knowledge and the information appropriately so that no one is ever coming in blind. And it's you, for me, the projects that have been successful are the ones that as someone's rolling out of the project, there's overlap. It's not a start and stop. I think it's important to recognize you need services from your designer through the bid process for your construction. You've got to get them involved so that your design firm can have those conversations with the folks that are going to bid so they know what it is that's going to be expected of them, and that you keep your design firm in place and overlap throughout that project. I've seen projects where there's a designer and they think that there's an end date, and they drop the designer off, and you've got construction and nobody has documented, so they have all these questions. Now you're looking to go back through the procurement process to bring someone back, and that firm may not be available. So now you've got to bring somebody to almost go back to stage one. So I think it's really important to have that mindset of, we're going to plan this almost whole play of this is where you come in, this is where you roll out, and make sure you have that plan up front. And all you can do is estimate the amount of effort. But as you go through and you use data from other projects, you can do a better estimation of what you need on like projects as you go through and you have experience. And a big part of that experience is making sure that you document it. So, I had a project like this 5 years ago. It cost this, and I needed this amount of people, or I had too many people. So now I can go back and reassess from my historic data in order to move forward. I think that's really important.
Agree with everything Ramona said, and I think it's visibility of all the resources across the company, right? So it's not going to do you a lot of good if you just grow your project management organization, but procurement, legal, O&M, the rest of the organization can't keep up. So I think it's the visibility right across, and then again, probably just can't stress enough, as near and dear to my heart, is like the O&M on the back end, right? No good if we build a great project and then didn't take care of it on the back end, right? So at least in our world, electricians and technicians, right, that the right assets and resources are in place to take care of whatever it is, right? We just poured our blood, sweat, and tears into building. So to me, it's that resources right across the enterprise, right, from planning, execution, right to O&M. So it's just having that visibility to the resources right across the company.
Means and methods. When you're scoping out the project, you have to start thinking about the means and methods of how you plan on going about building that project, because that will tell me the type of support I will have to give you in order to build that project. So I can begin to figure out what kind of resources you will need and I will have to supply you with. Also, if that's a resource that I cannot supply you with, I can let you know right off the bat so that can influence your scoping of the project and then your evaluation of how you will build it. Means and methods at the very upfront. Even when you think of what am I going to build, start thinking about how am I going to build it. I need to know years in advance. We worked with Connecticut Department of Transportation. We had Ben Limmer who was telling us that he's already started work on the Walk Bridge project. About 3.5, 4 years ago, we sat down with the DOT. We figured out how they're going to build a project, what support we had to provide. We hired the right people. It's gone into construction. They have the resources they need.
All right, well, you guys timed that up pretty perfectly. We have about 30 seconds left. So I just want to give a huge thank you to our panelists today. If you do have any questions for them, please come see us out in the foyer. We'll be out there for the next few minutes. And I think Ken's going to come up and introduce our next panel. So thank you, everyone.